Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media.
Welcome home to the native, landing on a podcast space destined for greatness. 60 minutes or so hit, not too long for the grave shift. High level combo, politics in a way that you can taste it, then digest it. Politics touches you even if you don't touch it, so get invested. Cross the T's and dot the I's, Gillum back to get 'em, stand on business with Rye. You could have been anywhere, but you chose us. Native Land Podcast, the brand that you can trust. Yes.
Why didn't anybody tell me we were bringing glasses?
Hey. Welcome home, y'all.
It's Dwayne
you
in the house.
You got on your Dwayne glasses. That is hilarious. You know, I used to love Dwayne
glasses.
Well, because the hip hop, Anyway, I have to be honest. Welcome home, y'all. First of all, this is episode 17 of Native Land Pod, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. We are your hosts. Angela have fake glasses, but we are your real hosts. I'm
just
Tiffany
feeling
Cross,
euphoric.
joined by Angela Rye, who's feeling euphoric, which I'll get
Thanks to Kendrick.
and Andrew Gillum. What's up, y'all? I have to say, I love the glasses. Angela, love your glasses. I am feeling euphoric, and I don't even know where to start because I just literally seconds ago just listened to Euphoria.
Oh,
guys,
I thought you were going to tell us you smoked today or something. Jeez.
No.
When are we taking the glasses off? This is a heavy load.
We can take them off now.
We can take them off now, but I just want to give a shout out to A Different World as they make their way around HBCUs.
Yeah,
speaking to the plight of our brothers and sisters of the HBCU campuses. Y'all are the reason I went to college.
But can I ask you guys, because you probably already listened. Have y'all listened to Euphoria yet?
Of course. Several times.
Of course you did. Of course you have. I'm still bleeding out from it.
Trying to read the lyrics here.
Oh, it's so perfect. And can I tell you my favorite
increasingly disrespectful. Tell me.
It's one little thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about yet. Kendrick's diss is 6 minutes and 23 seconds. What is the nickname for Toronto?
Is it Crody? Because I've been trying to figure out.
No, Crody is what Crips in Toronto call each other instead of Brody.
Oh,
he was in there. Like, when I tell you he was in there. But I think he made it 6 minutes because Toronto is the 6.
Oh,
that's what they call it?
The cleverness of it.
The brilliance.
Welcome home, y'all. This week, I'm sure you've heard by now that the judge overseeing the criminal justice trial with Donald Trump facing 34 counts related to hush money, they call it, for the alleged affair between he and Stormy Daniels. He was fined in that case $9,000 for violating the court's gag order. $9,000. Yeah. But this all happened on the heels of an interview he granted Time magazine in which he said a whole lot of wild stuff. He declared that if an election was in November, or when the election is in November, he would bypass the law and deploy U.S. military to detain and deport migrants if he's elected. He hedged on the possibility of more political violence if he's elected. He was basically saying his elected victory is inevitable. He would also permit states to decide whether to prosecute those who violate abortion bans. I can't even stress how dangerous that is. So for everyone thinking this election won't impact you, the GOP frontrunner is threatening to use the U.S. military for his political agenda. We're going to be talking about that all through the show today, so stay tuned. But here's what else we're talking about on the show this week. Because we like to talk about things that you didn't just hear on cable news, the things that you don't hear on cable news. We like to talk about things that are not being discussed. So we're going to start with this. What if I told you that hundreds of people, mostly black men, were being killed in the most painful and gruesome ways, and the government was in on it? Yeah, it's a true story. Stay tuned. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. And guess who's hiring all of a sudden? Police forces across the country. They show an increase in their ranks for the first time in 4 years. We'll get into why and what that might mean. And right on target, we've already seen their work across college campuses where professors and students alike are being met with state-sanctioned violence. It's ridiculous what we're seeing. We're going to dig into the continued unrest across college campuses all over the country. I have a question I want to ask my co-host when we get into that. Should these schools still hold graduation? We're going to see what Andrew and Angela think about that. And I've always got Georgia on my mind. Shout out to the A. The new battleground state is yet again struggling with a new voter suppression bill that could have dire consequences for the Biden-Harris administration. That's something you have not heard about in the echo chambers. We're going to get into that. And finally, yes, everybody, calm down. I know you want my thoughts on the NBA finals. I'm going to give them to you. But there's more than just the games, the playoffs. Excuse me, the playoffs, the NBA playoffs, and my prediction for the finals. Thank you. I was given a teaser of what I was actually going to talk about.
Thank you.
Nice cleanup.
I'm sorry, Prophet.
Anyway, we're going to talk about how you guys might be watching these games in the future. So stay tuned for that. And before we get into the show, I just want to give you all a little bit of history. If you're listening to this podcast fresh off the presses Thursday morning, 13 years ago today, on May 2nd, Osama bin Laden was killed by SEAL Team 6, a group of Navy SEALs. 24 years ago this week, South Africa was mired in talks led by their newly elected leader, Nelson Mandela, to end apartheid. And a whopping 530 years ago this week, Christopher Columbus arrived on the coast of Jamaica, setting the course for the Spaniards to slaughter the island's original inhabitants, a peaceful people known as the Arawaks. Ain't nothing new under the sun, y'all. No. All right. Now that we're throwing it back, let's push it forward. Nick, take us down 95 South and drop that bass. All right. Well, I mentioned the Time interview that Donald Trump did. Did you guys have anything on that?
We actually have a question about what would happen if we get stuck with Donald Trump for 4 more years. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Native Land Pod. My name is Sean. I'm 22 years old and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was just wondering if you guys had any advice, any tips, any suggestions, like literally anything about how we, the people, are going to deal with the next 4 years. We are probably, sadly, going to have Trump as the president, and we could potentially have a Republican House and a Republican Senate. And because of that, these Project 2025 policies will be passed that make or break our daily lives. So, as these issues are coming upon us, how are we as civilians going to react or should prepare ourselves for the next 4 years of our lives? Any suggestions on how the people are going or should survive?
I feel you, Sean.
First of all, I love Sean. Shout out to the ATL. And stay tuned, Sean, because we're going to talk about something coming out of Georgia later in the show. But I need Sean to keep up hope. Did y'all feel like he was kind of like it's
you
already
can answer that. But my advice is do everything you can to prevent that from happening.
Right. Especially in a battleground state. Come on, Sean. Don't give up hope.
You know, I understand where he's at, though. When you look at what's happening and feeling like the folks that we fought to get to the polls for in a pandemic, a lot of folks who, you know, don't necessarily have the access or the privilege of access to information that we have don't really feel supported and heard and fought for. So my advice to Sean would be make some calls to the White House and let folks know where you need to see them, how you need to see them. Kamala Harris is doing an economic tour right now that is incredible. She's been stumping for reproductive justice. We need the same kind of energy for DEI and some other things. Like, let folks know what you need to see so that people feel like they can be powerful in fighting. We also talked about some things on this podcast about what's happening in states and the kind of ads we want to see. Keep those kind of pieces coming. If we know that our ideas are being heard and we start to see them being made manifest, even what's happening with the marijuana pardons or changing it from a Schedule 1 drug, you know what I'm trying to say, reclassified from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That's major. I know it's not recreational, but it's still major. And so how can we lift up some of those things so that folks feel a little more hope-filled and hopeful? And I love that. You know, like Sean, but I understand.
Yeah.
I want to make sure
I love
knows.
that you brought
I understand.
Up, Vice President Harris, I know, Angela, you had mentioned the whole Mamala thing. If you guys can stay after, we should do a mini pod on that if you guys are free to do that.
I'm going to make time. I'm going to reclaim my time on that podcast.
One thing that frustrates me, I have to tell you guys, the echo chambers cover 2 or 3 things a day, and there's so much more happening. And this is something that happened that I've referenced on the show that I want to just tell people about the hundreds of Black men being killed in the most heinous of ways. In an analysis of more than 1,400 lethal injection executions conducted in the U.S. for the past 42 years, a new study shows that states made significantly more mistakes during the execution of Black people than they did with prisoners of any other races. I want you all to take a listen to what happens when these botched executions take place. And remember, this disproportionately impacts Black men. Take a listen.
To keep the prisoner from feeling any pain, executioners would administer 3 drugs. First, they would inject something to knock the person unconscious, usually an anesthetic or sedative. Second comes some sort of paralytic meant to cease all movement in the body. And finally, a drug to stop the heart, usually potassium chloride. But here's something that shocked us while researching this piece. The man responsible for coming up with the 3-drug cocktail, he says he acted on a hunch. By his own admission, Dr. A.J. Chapman did no research before coming up with the idea. And Chapman later admitted he was, quote, an expert in dead bodies, but not an expert in getting them that way. We may have been sold the myth of the painless execution, but many people on death row know how painful it could be. So some prisoners have asked to be killed a different way. The vast majority of executions for the last 40 years have used lethal injection, but other methods are still on the books, like electrocution, which one medical examiner said essentially cooks the brain. Still, some say they would prefer that execution method because the electric chair usually takes around 2 minutes to kill someone. Lethal injection has taken over 2 hours in some cases.
All right. I was horrified when I heard this. And the problem is because of a very punishing criminal justice system, the amount of Black men that are sent to death row in Louisiana, the odds of a death sentence were 97% higher for Black men whose victim was white. In Oklahoma, a study found that cases with white female victims, cases with white male victims, and cases with minority female victims are more likely to end with a death sentence in Oklahoma with non-white male victims. So I just, when looking at this, I was mortified. I read this in the Times a couple weeks ago, and it just occurred to me, I don't even know how you all feel about it. So Angela and Andrew, are you all, I don't know where you stand on the death penalty. Do you think it's something that should happen?
I've never been for the death penalty. I think that you put yourself in the shoes of God when you take someone's life. And so I don't support it. I think what's remarkable to me are the folks who are allegedly pro-life or anti-choice, who are very gung-ho death penalty, almost like aggressively so. And that hypocrisy has always been, really interesting to me. That once the person gets here, you no longer care about how they live or if they live. So, yeah, I don't support the death penalty. I certainly understand when you have some situations where, it's hard to look at someone or see someone living if they've taken the life of your loved one. But I can't do it. I don't know what I would do if, faced it like in a situation of self-defense or something like that. But the death penalty, sentencing someone to death is not my choice. And I don't think it should be any of ours.
Yeah. Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've evolved on this one because, when I was younger, it was if someone did something to my mother, I'd want to kill them, and now that I'm a husband and a dad to 3 kids, I think, man, if somebody, you don't got to kill them. If you do something that traumatizes them in such a way, you touch them, you can imagine the scenarios in which you just want to wrap your hands around somebody and bring them to heal. But the beauty is that's why I wouldn't be a jurist in a trial that involved one of my children, right? Or one of my relatives who I care about and love deeply. And an evolved system, you would think that people would be able to look at these things, and even for the families who have seen the aggressor put to death for what they did in violation of their loved ones, they don't feel any more complete at the end of the day. They don't feel any more healed. They don't feel any more whole. They don't feel any more reconciled. They don't feel like there was an eye for an eye. There is no justice in that once you take my loved one's life. And I think the reverse also has to be true. That being said, when I ran for governor, I did come out against the death penalty. I still am today against it. But for me, it was an evolution. I think I was thinking with my, not most matured mind about it, right? It was retribution. It was, if you come for me, we come for you. And in an evolved system of justice, I think we've got to figure out as a society how to get beyond it. But your reporting on this, Tiffany, with regard to the disproportionate application of the death penalty as a sentence when Black folks sit in its crosshairs. Think about the number of Black folks who have been sentenced to death and weren't even appropriately found guilty. Like, they've been adjudicated through, the Innocence Project or organizations like that are out there to make sure that if you put someone on death row, you better make sure, double check, make sure that you've got the right person. And unfortunately, if you execute someone, that's irreversible. You can't take that back. So in all ways, I think we are impacted. And I think we're impacted and get the short end of the string on that one every time. And sentencing and the application of when the death penalty gets ascribed to you. And then obviously in the carrying out of the death penalty, which you've highlighted here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, Black and Latino men make up 31% of the population and make up 53% of death row inmates. So it's outrageous to see that this is happening. And I think, the prison population is often overlooked and not talked about. And so we just want you all to know, your loved ones who listen to us, that our brothers and sisters in prison, you are not forgotten about here at Native Land. Welcome home, y'all, if you do get to listen. And just, we want y'all to know that y'all are on our hearts and we acknowledge your existence because you matter. But this is right on topic with another report that came out this week about police swelling their ranks yet again. More police officers were hired in 2023 than in any previous 4 years, and fewer officers overall resigned or retired. This is all according to the 214 law enforcement agencies that responded to a survey giving their numbers. And I bring this up because pendulums swing, and this one is swinging again. And just because it's not a breaking news banter where we were seeing our blood spattered across TV screens every few minutes does not mean that these types of violence, aggression towards Black people specifically aren't happening. We certainly see it happening on college campuses, which we'll get into. But if you guys, I want you to listen to what police are facing. We actually hear from the Palm Springs Police Chief, Andrew Wells, and he talks about basically what he's hiring. So take a listen and we'll talk about it on the other side.
This was a horribly tremendous experience over the last few years where you had COVID, the uncertainty of whether or not you're going to come home because of that, and then rolling that right into a lot of social unrest. I think that they're looking for that community where they see support.
He says policing in 2023 is a tougher job than it's ever been, as officers are expected to deal with social issues such as mental illness and homelessness.
Right now, the police are the only ones here to handle things that are incumbent on all of society. And I've got a 24-year-old kid with a BA degree or maybe a high school education trying to solve problems that PhDs can't solve.
So this is, I think, what we're seeing a lot of across the country now with this overly pronounced police force on college campuses. And this is not anything new. Do you guys remember, please forgive me if I get this wrong, but there was a pool party somewhere in Texas, and this police officer ran and tackled this girl, a teenage girl, like he was squaring off with a linebacker, and tackled her, a young Black woman, to the ground, a young Black girl to the ground. And I just look at these statistics about, police swelling their ranks, and I just wonder, should this unrest end peacefully on college campuses, that does not mean that this aggressive police increase is going to end their tactics. So just
Tiffany,
want your thoughts on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Before, to go back to the reporting, the reporter said that police are dealing with issues that they haven't had to deal with before, like homelessness and social unrest.
Right.
As far as I can remember, police officers, certainly in my community, were dealing with homelessness pre-COVID. back when, in 2003 when I first ran for office, social issues. I'll tell you what the big difference is. The big difference is there is greater accountability now. Yeah. We saw in the George Floyd case the first, near first successful prosecution of law enforcement for the murder, the senseless murder of George Floyd. We know that through body-worn cameras, through people taking footage, anytime they see law enforcement encountering citizens, that the pressure is on them to actually live up to the high expectation that should accompany any job where you have the ability to take life and almost be unaccountable for having taken life, right? If you carry the power of God on your waist belt, there ought to be cameras. There ought to be accountability. You ought to be investigated upon use of, firing of, pulling, and obviously the execution of citizens in that regard. There's aside from the militaries, there's no other place in civil society where we give the power of an individual, a man, a woman, a person, to be judge, jury, and executioner should they decide. And so, no, it isn't homelessness and social unrest that's different and creating demand. It is greater accountability, and there ought to be more of it, right? The fact that we can name the cases in which police officers have been accountable tells you enough that we're not seeing enough accountability in the system when we can name check them. I want to see a system where it isn't name check, where it is routine that these evaluations and systems of accountability kick into action. But I don't buy that one red, cent. What's different is that we got to police homelessness now. No, sir.
It's called BS on site. Angela, you dropped in our group chat this horrific interview with the former president, Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think what is most unnerving to me is someone who was elected as the law and order president running for re-election now, even though he can't obey a law or an order, is talking about really wanting to see immunity, not just for the January 6th insurrectionists and terrorists, who he also said that he would pardon, but also he said that he wanted police officers to have immunity. And that is really terrifying to me. Yeah, he wants them to be immune from prosecution. That, of course, is a lion's share beyond what has been the case, which is they have some protection from being personally sued. We've been fighting for that to be overturned for some time. But he wants them to be immune from criminal liability. So if we use that, look at an example that I know pricked the consciences of many in this country. With George Floyd, the officers who were prosecuted for the murder of George Floyd that we all saw on tape, they would not have been prosecuted because they would be immune in their official capacity. That is what Donald Trump is saying that he wants to do. So for me, that makes me really nervous. Like we've seen, no matter who's in office, no matter who is the president, police officers who are rogue, who only protect and serve some and shoot to kill others. And what he's saying is, I want to make it so that they are not prosecuted. In some ways, they would say dog whistle. I think that as many times as they say, Donald Trump says the quiet part out loud. The fact that there was ever a quiet part, right? Yeah. And the fact that you can now articulate it verbally is the whole problem. This should have never been the quiet part. The quiet part should have always been challenged. And by virtue of the fact that now he's not only saying it loud, he's doing it loud. His actions are loud. He is rogue and he wants officers to be rogue. I don't know what that means for this country. I am not trying to be gloom and doom, but I want people to know what's really at stake. And this is severe, and it's all in print on time.
It's hard not to be doom and gloom when you read that, the picture he paints. Yeah. And in this interview, I thought the interviewer did a great job because he was fact checking him in real time. And he said, but Mr. President, violent crime has gone down. And this is a time where we're seeing police swell their ranks. And he's saying this is according to law enforcement, many of whom support you. And Donald Trump says, nope, I don't believe it. That's not true. Another thing I think we have to...
from the FBI and not the local police departments.
And a lot of his supporters, by the way, support abolishing the FBI for this law and order president, by the way. But another thing that I think, this might be a mini pod, because we also have to think about the future of policing, right? And so as these agencies are hiring more law enforcement officers, I was reading, I think from Reuters, they were saying how they're also spending money on like more body cameras, which I think is good, but also license plate readers, drones, thermal imaging, shot spotters, investigative technologies, video surveillance, facial recognition technology. And when we think about that and the ways that we are disproportionately harmed by law enforcement, I mean, to me, I hear you, Angela, we don't want to be doom and gloom, but we could be looking at a dystopian society, a police state where police have, to your point, no accountability, and a president who also has no accountability. So what does that mean for a peaceful transition of power? What does that mean for a peaceful protest that happen? What does that mean for people minding their own business, walking down the street, and like stop and frisk policies could reemerge? So it is frightening. It is doom and gloom to me.
I tell you, first of all, we're not unfamiliar with what it is to live in a society where law enforcement gets to act without accountability. From its very beginning, by and large, back in, during the Western expansion toward California, sheriffs would put a badge on their sibling or a friend so that they could lawfully kill an enemy of theirs, right? And so it's not unfamiliar that this is where Trump wants to take us back to, wherein more accountability is attempting to be had for people in power who have gone unchecked, law enforcement being at the epicenter of that. These folks are saying, hey, how do we get to go out and do our job when we got people pulling out cameras all the time? You ever see these law enforcement folks who say, put away the phone, put down the phone? These are passerbyers, right?
Yeah.
In Eric Garner's case, we saw a similar situation. Law enforcement turned their anger toward pedestrians saying, put down the phone, put down the phone. They don't want accountability. And now what this man is attempting to do is to introduce the lawful killing of civilians, to reintroduce the lawful killing of civilians without any accountability whatsoever. And then finally on this, Tiff and Angela, do y'all remember the good old days when people across political ideologies were talking about the need for the de-escalation of law enforcement, the need to reform police departments so that they weren't just, gun carriers, but that you had folks who did civil patrol and traffic, and you had folks who were homeless and social workers, and that whole recalibration
and not feeding the
rethinking.
Military-industrial complex of giving police force military equipment. Yeah,
and look what we're going back to.
Yeah.
And look at now what he wants to throw back to.
But look at what we're seeing right now on these college campuses. I think I want to get into that because it is hard to not address what has happened this week. I do want to get into that because the violence that we have seen take place across these college campuses has been just unimaginable, quite frankly. So we're going to take a quick break, pay some bills, but don't go anywhere because the three of us are going to dive into some of the horrific scenes that we've all bore witness to this week. So stay right there. We'll be right back.
This is the New York City Police Department. You have been warned by New York University to meet again. Please have the plaza now. You will be arrested for trespass. Attention, you're under arrest for criminal trespass.
وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله
Fucking get me, trooper! Come and get me! Come and get me! Allahu Akbar! Walk towards High Street, everybody!
I want to give a shout out to Eli Hiller for that second video. He's been doing a lot of free coverage of the protests at OSU. But honestly, this week from Loyola University in New Orleans to the University of New Mexico to UCLA to Northwestern and Washington U, encampments have popped up on more than 36 campuses across this country. And the ubiquitous coverage of students and faculty calling for a ceasefire and a divestment in Israel shows support erupting across the nation and quite frankly across the globe, which we'll get into when we talk about it. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What does this mean? One, for upcoming graduations, which I know pales in comparison when we're talking about the level of violence and people who are still being killed in Gaza. But also, the role of municipalities and how we think they're handling it. But most importantly, I'm curious, are these protests having any impacts on U.S. foreign policy? So, Andrew, I wanted to start with you here because, you don't think about these things until they happen. But looking at the way these municipalities has handled it, like it is up to the mayor to call the police or not, which I did not realize. And mayors have been making that choice. You were mayor of Tallahassee. I'm curious should a protest like this had broken out on the campus of FAMU, how might you have handled it?
Well, I don't have to theorize. FAMU was often having protests, not just FAMU. I was mayor of Tallahassee, which has 2 state universities in one city: Florida A&M University, Florida State. I got some balloons here. Florida State.
They're like, congratulations, bitch.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Tallahassee Community College, which is now Tallahassee Tallahassee Community College. So 60, almost 90,000 students right here in this area, and protest is pretty regular and pretty rampant with the state capitol here. A couple of things. One, typically law enforcement of a municipality does not enter into a university campus without being invited, asked into and onto a university campus. Most, at least in our case, most campuses have their own campus-based police. That's true here, and it's true at Columbia. It's true at many of the other institutions. So the university really takes the lion's share of the responsibility of shaping the response to students who are trying to protest. I've heard people say in the last couple of days, these protests have gone too far. They have now gone and sat in and taken over buildings. Well, we took over buildings. We took over presidents' offices. We took over student union complexes in order to get into attention and to create an inconvenience. That was the point. If we went and sat under a tree that nobody ever saw, what real impact might we have? So it really is annoying to me to hear people saying, this was okay when they were outside on the lawn and with their signs and making noise. But when you go into a building, when you go and sit in a president's office, you've crossed the line. That defies any logic around civil rights movements, civic participation, and protests. Woolworths weren't serving Black folks in the late 1950s and early 60s, right? To go into a Woolworth and sit at a counter that was reserved for white folks was a provocation. And so with the people who are right now criticizing folks for occupying, for taking up space that you say is not theirs, would you have the same opinion? Or did you have the same opinion? When we were watching the Woolworth counter demonstrations and so on and so forth. What I would say for anyone who is either on a college campus or lives in a college community, when it comes to these kinds of protests, I would be very slow to call in local law enforcement unless it is absolutely necessary, in large part because local law enforcement oftentimes does not deal exclusively with students. They deal with some of the more hardened in our community and not oftentimes protests. And I think sometimes the need to show who is in charge, I'm the authority here, has the intention of escalating a situation and causing things to spiral out of control when we think what we're doing is calling in safety and keeping everyone safe. In fact, it's the direct opposite. That's not always true with local law enforcement, but I will tell you, I've seen far too many occasions, too many instances where we've gone from 0 to 100 almost overnight by the presence of enhanced law enforcement, where they come in with riot gear, warlike vehicles, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And it just has no place on a college campus, in my opinion.
I'm curious your thoughts, Angela, because as of Tuesday, more than 1,200 people have been arrested.
Yeah, the first thing that I want to say is I have been really watching this and watching my rhetoric and trying to be mindful about how I'm engaging around the protests. Is there something from the other side that I'm missing? Is there a blind spot that I have? I did an interview last week for a podcast, and I was asked if I thought that some of the hate speech was okay. And I was like, well, can you give me an example of what you heard? Because maybe I didn't hear it. I really want to know. And I think that, one, I'm concerned when I see Congress, considering a bill that redefines anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. And then part of me says, I'm really interested in what other movements, what other protected classes we can include in some of this. If we are true allies, as we've known the Jewish people to be from the civil rights movement, can we include in there protections for the Palestinian people? Can we include in there protections for Black lives? Can we include in there protections for migrants? Can we include in there, right? Everybody who has been hit hard on every side, can we include them in there to be protected? Shouldn't we all receive that same protection? I'm all for expanding the Civil Rights Act because I don't want it to go away. And if this means we get to preserve it a little longer, by all means, let's include who needs to be included. But also, because I was so just feeling like the weight of what was happening in the civil rights movement, I picked up Julian Bond's Time to Teach, which our dear brother Van Newkirk wrote the afterword for. And I read it a long time ago, and I was like, let me pick this back up. Van, as you all know, is a brilliant, brilliant writer. And
at the Atlantic.
Yes, he's at the Atlantic, but he wrote the afterword in this book. And in what Van was saying, he talked about sowing seeds of doom or using the seeds for a paradigm shift. And I think that that's what this moment can offer us, because one of the lessons that Julian Bond gives in this book is that movements at the time are never popular.
Come on.
They're never popular. They don't take off because there's viral and widespread support. They take off because they're necessary, because somewhere someone had a conscience. I want us to sit with that. Like, if we can put our humanity first, how do we show up? If we can lay aside the labels just for a moment, how do we show up? There are kids now who are going to go into a very hot summer without running water, who are taking baths at hoses with buckets in Gaza, who are going to cool off in the ocean. And those are play days for them. And those are the only moments of fun that they're having. But there are also people like a young woman who I read about yesterday who has been so traumatized. She's a teenager and she's urinating on herself uncontrollably. Like, this is not the kind of thing that we can turn a blind eye to and say, because you looked at me wrong, because you said the wrong thing, because you did the wrong thing, because you're not speaking up and naming every single hostage, like you're naming or numbering the amount of people who died in Gaza. I can't even hear the morality of what you're saying. It's fine to humanize the other side, the folks who are focused on the large numbers of people who are being hit, the folks who are saying, yeah, there was $1 billion for Gaza in this aid package, but $17 billion for weapons for Israel, and I got a problem with it. You can certainly make sure that we are conscious and conscientious about what's coming out of our mouths. But let us remember that we need to be standing on the right side of history. Where would you have stood with the Vietnam War protests? Where would you have stood in a sit-in with Rosa Parks or the folks who came before her, who preceded her? Where would you have stood when affirmative action was on the ballot in my home state in Washington? Where would you have stood? Or would you have just looked and said, that's a shame? And the truth is, the real shame are those of us who aren't courageous enough to say something because we're worried that our pockets will be impacted, or we're worried that we'll lose an elected office, or we're worried that we'll lose friends. They ain't your friends anyway if they don't allow you the space to tell the truth and to ask some tough questions. You are not safe. And none of us are safe as long as we continue to turn a blind eye to this remarkable crisis.
Tiffany,
I
I
think
got a
what you
question for
said-
you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so you've been on the journalism side of this, and I've been baffled by the conflation of protest equaling anti-Semitic
Yes.
and targeted or offended being reserved for only one group of people. Can you help us understand why is it so hard for the media, for the press? And I say this with only very few journalists, mostly writers who are going on campuses and actually talking to people, understanding what folks are saying. Why is it so hard to, in telling the story, tell the whole thing?
Yeah. Well, number one, Semite people include more than just Jewish people. So when you say anti-Semitic, that can really apply to multiple groups of ethnic people, including Muslims. But the way the media has kind of framed this for the last few decades, it has been specific to Jewish people. And I want to be clear, I'm not covering any of these protests. I haven't been on the ground.
Sure.
So, I'm bearing witness like you guys are. I think, and I also just want to give a quick shout out to Sarah Schneider, who did an amazing interview this week on CNN with a Palestinian student, because you don't see a lot of those voices. And I would say, Andrew, it's because of the same reasons why it was a controversial statement to say Black Lives Matter. It was so often what we consider to be right or moral, even in newsrooms, what we consider to be ethical or unbiased, is centered on what is white and what is male. Because those were disproportionately the decision makers. And even when you have people of color rise through the ranks, they still carry that same water because that was their training. And we lose, I think, a part of our just intellectual curiosity about these things. Just for the journalism lens of this, yes, Hamas attacked Israel, or Israelis, killing about 1,200 people, taking around 250 people hostages. A horrible thing to happen. In response, the IDF, ordered by Netanyahu, have killed over 34,000 people, most of whom are women and children. When we say that, it almost sounds like, well, it doesn't matter if you kill men. All of these lives matter. And I appreciate your point, Angela, because a lot of these things are comprehensible in the macro and not the micro. You tell me 34,000 people died and it's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. You tell me the story of one little girl who has play dates in an ocean and who's urinating on herself uncontrollably because she's traumatized. And that is a different story to tell. And we don't see that on a lot of U.S. media. I think Al Jazeera has done solid work in covering this. And you guys will remember 20 years ago, Al Jazeera was like, we can't watch Al Jazeera. And, they're like a terrorist news outlet. And it's just not true. It's been proven to be untrue. I do want to say that these protests have cast a wide net of influence across the globe. It is not just students in the U.S., but students everywhere across the Middle East and globally are joining with protesters in solidarity, from Kuwait to Lebanon to Egypt, and even at the Sorbonne in Paris. Italy, Britain, Canada, and they say that they were directly inspired by U.S. students. So for any students listening to us, we hear you, we see you, and you have sparked a global movement and shifted a policy posture that the United States has had. And I think these voices on the ground are rising up. I want you guys to hear from some of the people directly. Take a listen. This is sound that Angela actually dropped in our group chat from two Palestinians expressing their gratitude for people acknowledging their humanity. Take a listen.
Gives us a glimpse of hope is that we weren't left alone. And that goes for the efforts made by the students of the universities in America.
We are lost everything, but we can't lose the hope because of you, because you stand by us. Thank you.
It's unimaginable what they're facing, and we are not wrong for acknowledging their humanity and calling for an immediate ceasefire. But these students also want divestment from Israel, which is why I brought up apartheid, that in 1990, there were talks in how to end apartheid in South Africa. And this, I'm telling you, to me, some people might say it's a false equivalency, but it certainly, I think there are some parallels there.
Yeah.
Listening to those two young women, I feel some type of way about it, because the folks who carried out the massacre in Israel are not the same people who we see on the screen there saying, thank you for seeing our humanity. Hamas carried out and executed a terrorist attack. And in retribution for that, we've seen almost in a universal attack, almost distinguishing not between civilian and military and terrorists. Everybody's being looped together. And this was part of why I was getting at, why the hell is it so hard to see the difference? I was going to say the nuance, but it's not even a nuance. You have people who carry out an attack, those who are victim of the attack, and then you have innocent men, women, children who, just because of where they are forced to live, no choice, forced to live, that they are right now the largest community of people who sit at the most devastating level of impact of this thing. And I just, for those who are covering it, who are writing about it, can we please start to make the difference between the roles in which these folks are playing, so that we don't cast everybody by the same in the same net. It's
a question
upsetting
for you. But yes, and I definitely don't want to make like college graduations are just as important as people's lives. I mean, one is clearly more important. People's humanity and their lives are important. But I'm just curious to hear from you guys. Should these schools proceed with their graduation ceremonies?
I hope so.
Absolutely.
I hope so. I gave the example of a speaker who I didn't want at my graduation. I wasn't an advocate for canceling the damn thing. I was an advocate for showing out against that speaker, but walking across the stage and celebrating my achievement with my peers. I feel honestly, I do feel for these students, because as you all know, these are the same students who did prom virtually and graduated virtually 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so many of them are now being hit with the same thing, because universities don't know what to do with First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, like, I feel like this whole question about graduation really began with the cancellation of the USC valedictorian speech. Asna Tabas, I don't know how to say her last name, Tabassum. Sorry if I said it wrong. But, they canceled her speech and talked about security concerns. And then they were like, throw the whole graduation away. And now that's even on the table is just like trifling. Like, I'm sorry. I understand that at private schools, you don't necessarily have free speech. We talked about it last time. You have a code of conduct that generally supports free speech and the right to assemble. Doesn't mean you have the right to occupy buildings and spaces and all of that. But that is a part of protest. Protest is designed to put something in your face and make you uncomfortable. That is the point. And if we can't see beyond that and realize, like, every time in history where you've had this outsized response, and you brought in law enforcement and they look like the military trying to throw kids wherever, starve them out, all of that. Number one, it looks like the thing they're protesting. Number two, it is a slap in the face for those of us who are still traumatized by what happened on Capitol Hill on January 6th. And that was not even your response to like an actual terrorist attack where somebody wiped shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk, for lack of a better term, shit. Yeah, it's like, how this is mind blowing to me. It really is. And I'm not saying that every single one of these protesters, because we know that all of them are not students, but those who are standing in solidarity with the student protesters, I'm not saying all of them have done every single thing right. But what I am saying is they are probably at their wits' end. about how to break through, about what else can we say to you about how serious this is, about why do we need to tell you about history? This is a place of higher learning. It's an Ivy in some of these instances, not all the schools are, but you should know better than to have history repeating itself. Meet us halfway, ensuring that people have equitable access to education in all spaces. If you're going to do something in Tel Aviv, ensure the Palestinian people can also attend. That's a part of the protest. Like, they're saying we're watching all of this happen. You're receiving resources from here. Like, this is a problem. And we should not be so held to a resource, elected officials, institutions of higher learning, that we won't do the right thing. And right now, these young people can afford to do the right thing because they ain't got bills to pay yet, some of them. Right. And some of them like, hell with that. And I admire their courage to just ask why. Some of it is just a why. Some of it is just explain it to me.
Well, a follow-up to that for you or Andrew, whoever wants to answer. One, what impact do we think this will have on the election in November? And two, do we think that these protests is having any impact on our foreign policy? The fact is not lost on me, Angela, you point out the $17 billion that we have allocated to Israel, who's likely using that money to fund the IDF for the assault that we've seen on Gaza. So what is the final impact of all these protests? What's going to be the tangible result?
I fear, honestly, if I'm being real truthful here, I think Republicans are creating a foil and a straw man argument that Biden and the Democrats are going to want to run away from. The lawlessness, the chaos, the crime. You heard Donald Trump during this interview defying what the statistics, what the numbers, what the actual reality is, which is violent crime going down everywhere across America. And him saying, I don't believe it. Faux facts, fake news, right? They're going to create, I think, the straw man argument that if you elect Democrats, what you get is protests, chaos, disrespect, occupying of buildings, lawlessness, increased crime. And I think the way in which Democrats will answer will be to shroud themselves in safety, security, rhetoric, and quite frankly, have little to no impact on what U.S. foreign policy will look like. Joe Biden, on one hand, stood up and said, never again, don't do this, recalibrate your war approach so that civilians are not, impacted the way that they are today. And then 2 weeks later, gung-ho signing a bill, sending weapons, arms manufactured right here in the United States of America, sent across that are extracting and exacting the same harm that he just decried. Right.
What do you think about that, Angela? What Andrew said?
Well, what I was getting ready to tell you, I wanted to look this up because I was like, how is the aid kind of divvied up in Israel? So on this point, but slightly tangential, going back to the original question, United States, this is from the Council on Foreign Relations, the United States provided Israel considerable economic assistance from 1971 to 2007, but nearly all U.S. aid today goes to support Israel's military. The United States has provisionally agreed to provide Israel with nearly $4 billion a year through 2028. And of course, that does not include the supplementary funding for what's happening with Hamas right now.
So what do you think, that first of all, that's frightening, but what do you think this means for November?
Tiff, I was trying to avoid this question, answering it, because honestly, I'm scared because
same.
For the Palestinian people, there's not a win with either candidate. Mm-hmm. There's not a win. It can get worse. It can get considerably worse, right? Like Donald Trump doesn't care. Like he did some of the things to agitate Hamas to even go here, right? In October, we know all of the things he was doing in his administration with Jared Kushner, with Stephen Miller, with, putting up an embassy in Jerusalem to make a statement. We know what he's done. He is only going to make it worse. And then what I think is interesting is he's saying in this Time interview that we've referenced already a few times, in the Time interview, he's basically kind of hinting at the fact that he's mad at Bibi Netanyahu, but he plays both sides. He plays both sides. We've seen him do it since Charlottesville. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Literally, like, there's good people on both sides, but we know his intention is going to be to support Israel by any means necessary.
I don't even think he played both sides. I mean, he was very clear. He does not support a two-state solution anymore, which is, I don't know how that could even, that's not both sides to me.
It's not both sides on that, but I'm saying, like, him being like, kind of hinting at, I'm mad at Netanyahu, so maybe I wouldn't work with him like that. That's what I mean, very specifically about.
I think he was honestly only saying that, Angela, because the people of Israel are not happy with Netanyahu. So I think he is like hedging his bets that, hey, people of Israel, I'm still with you. I'm the president who's done the most for Israel, which is not true. Right, exactly. So
it could look like to some, like, really well-meaning, only see silver lining student, young people, since we were talking about young people, he doesn't fool with Netanyahu at all, so maybe we'll have a better run with him. That is not the case. Like, don't forget what he did when he was elected in 2016. He has by far had the most conservative policies, completely alienating the Palestinian people. This is still the man behind the Muslim ban, right? Like, let's be very clear about that.
His first act.
This is not, please don't be confused. Please don't be deceived. Like, this is absolutely the same guy.
Well, I think
more
what
emboldened,
is also completely, and what is also more frightening, this president will take us to a war. I mean, he said he has said that if Iran gets involved, then he hasn't ruled out that we will go on war. Well, you can argue Iran is already involved. So again, we'll have to see what this means for our foreign policy. We're coming up on a hard break, Andrew, but you go ahead, weigh in, and then after that we'll go to break.
To your point, Bibi Netanyahu, the reason why he has taken the tack that he has is because he believes that there's popularity in war. If you are standing for us against everybody else, then you're our guy. And I mean, the fear, the terrible part of this is that these folks are willing to use our bodies, our lives, as bargaining chits for political positioning, to win, to be popular.
And wartime presidents benefit because it does it. It has an impact on the economy. Right. It benefits the economy in some ways, but it is detrimental to people. And the highest ethnic group, I believe, this was the case a few years ago, I'll fact check myself, but the highest group of ethnic group that joins our armed services are Black women, which is something that we also don't talk a lot about. So we've literally saved this country numerous times. All right, we got to take a quick break. Coming on the other side of this, we're going to talk about why Georgia is on my mind. Should be on all of ours, so stay tuned.
Georgia.
Ooh, go ahead.
They said Mississippi, goddamn. Maybe it should be Georgia.
Dang.
No.
I love, that's one of my favorite Nina Simone songs, Mississippi, goddamn. And we literally still feel that way. But honestly, all throughout the Bible Belt, Angela and I were on the phone earlier this week talking about just like the black battleground, because everybody always says, the South is red, and it's like the South is red until it ain't. Like, there are pockets that we can influence. Speaking of that, Georgia is one of those pockets. Georgia is now officially a battleground state, so whatever happens there actually has big influence, which is why when the GOP-controlled Georgia state legislature passed a wide-ranging election measure, we should all pay attention and be a bit concerned, in my opinion. In this new bill, any political party or political body could qualify for the presidential ballot if they or it has already gained access to the ballot in at least 20 states or territories. So you guys think about this in terms of RFK and what that might mean for him. Under the law, homeless people... Well, the proposed law, because it hasn't been signed by the governor yet. Homeless people must also redo their voter registrations. Previously, registered voters without permanent addresses have registered at like shelters or like government offices. Well, no more. The bill also includes provisions that would make it easier for some of these amateur right-wing voter fraud hunters to successfully challenge voter registrations. You guys remember when that bill passed in 2021 and they were overwhelmed with these ridiculous, bogus challenges? Well, they've made the path easier for that now. These things include
They still the ones committing the crime, so
Exactly. Well, thank you, Andrew, because what a great time to remind people. Y'all's favorite white man president called election officials there asking to please find 11,000 votes, but they stay on some let's find the cheaters when they're the cheaters. The call is coming from inside the house. But the presumption it includes the presumption that the voter has died or has registered to vote in a different jurisdiction or registered at a non-residential address. So I guess I put this question to you guys. I don't know what this means, and since Georgia's a battleground state, but more importantly, what can we do about it? Like, how do we combat these things? Governor Kemp, an expert in voter suppression, by the way, has until May 7th to sign the bill. But even if he doesn't sign it, the only way it won't become law is if he vetoes it. I don't see that happening.
I mean, haven't they've done everything but take the right to vote away
truly
in the state of Georgia. I mean, and that's only because it's an amendment in the Constitution of the United States of America. They'd have to amend the Constitution but they've done everything short of completely take away our votes. But they're not the only ones, y'all. These things keep popping up in similar legislation in mind, similar legislation all across the Black Belt. The intention is 1,000% clear, right? And I guess, all I can say is we have to continue to persevere. They're never going to make this easy. No one is going to save us but us. And so, it's not me throwing in the towel. It's simply saying, if they can put the roadblock up, expect it, right?
This is what Sean was talking about.
Plan the detour.
Sean, who sent in the question, I'm glad you said it's not you throwing in the towel, Andrew. Like you saying, like, plan for the detour. And I gotta say, it is hard to overstate the significance of the Black vote in Georgia. From 2000 to 2019, the number of eligible voters in Georgia increased by nearly 2 million people, with Black people making up nearly half that number. That's according to Pew Research. And Georgia is one of 6 battleground states expected to determine the outcome of this election. Angela, you always have like a strong, like, this is what y'all got to do in Georgia. I know you gave Sean some words of encouragement. I'm just curious, what can we say to the voters of Georgia at large facing this?
I think it goes right back to what we were just talking about around movement building. Like, this stuff is not popular, but it's necessary. I was feeling discouraged too. Again, part of the reason why I picked up the Julian Bond book, because I'm like, how far back are we going to go? Like, why are we going backwards like this? But we have to remember there's always a retraction after progress. And so you cannot give up hope. We have every right to fight. We have every right to be here. We have every right and have always had every right to vote. So let's not give it up so easy. I also want to shout out our dear sister and our brother, Cliff, Latasha and Cliff, for doing the work in Black Voters Matter and making the ballot box so much more accessible for our people. To when we all vote, for making it a national issue that was detached largely from race, for the Brennan Center, who make sure that we're educated on these issues writ large, and for all of our civil rights orgs who make sure that we're informed and we're doing the work and suing when we need to. Maybe we have some more lawsuits so they on their heels like we've been on our heels on all of our rights. But I really would just say, just keep going, keep fighting. You deserve to drink water and have a snack at the voting place. But you're going to be challenged, and I think that's a part of it. And just remember that somebody did it for us. Let me break out. This is a good time to break out Harriet. Where's my Harriet? Hold on.
Michael?
There she goes.
Let's see here.
There she go. There's Harriet. So anytime you get tired,
not Michael, Andrew, Harriet Tubman.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to quote.
Oh my God, this is why you need to pay attention.
No, I thought you were about to quote Michael Harriet.
I do not have Mike. I love Michael Harriet, but he is not around my neck. This is Harriet Tubman. Shout out to Black AF history too, so you understand the retractions we're talking about. Michael Harriet, we'll talk about that in the book. But this is important. Anytime you get tired, remember that there were folks who toiled and went down roads where there was no path, so that it would make our path that much easier. So certainly we can fight to protect our voting rights.
I love that. I think about that. What right do we have to be tired, considering what our ancestry?
Well,
went
we
through?
got a right to be tired, but
we do. But when I
take a nap and get up and keep working.
Yeah, take a nap. Myself, I feel tired. I'm like, what right do you,
believe
Tiffany,
in a
have
nap
to be
ministry.
tired? Yeah. Andrew, you were gonna say something before I move us on.
It better be on topic too, because I don't know what you doing over there talking about, Michael.
No. I thought about this poem that I had committed to memory so many years ago.
See it through.
Don't quit.
Oh, sorry.
And it talks about success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. It's when things seem worse that you mustn't quit was a line that came to me when you were saying,
I love that.
you know, Angela talked about, you know, with the evolution of time, we make, you know, gigantic steps forward, but then there feels like this whole, golly, you know, we can't win for losing, right? The retraction starts, and oftentimes it really is sort of like the last stand, and it's when things seem and feel worse that we mustn't quit.
I love
don't
that.
Quit.
I love that. Okay, we're moving on to basketball. And before you get all excited, I'm not going to give you my opinion on the NBA finals or playoffs. Yes, we'll get into that in a second. But this is our segment. Politics are everywhere, and politics are even in where and how you watch these games. The companies holding the rights to show NBA games, that's Disney, which owns ESPN and ABC, and Warner Brothers Discovery, the parent company of TNT, they are collectively paying the league $24 billion over 9 years for that privilege. But guys, their contracts expire after next season, and the NBA, they set their eyes onto more than double the money it receives. So they're looking at like in the $50 billion range to air their games. Take a look, but the reason why is really interesting because sports never, like you never hear like, oh, the NBA is down in profit by billions of dollars. People watch the NFL, they watch the NBA. Take a listen to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver on his predictions and thoughts around as they negotiate their next round of TV contracts. Take a listen.
There's so much competition these days in media. I mean, just think of what's going on at TNT in terms of changes in cable, what's happening at CNN, and everything's moving digitally. So as we're looking out the next decade, we got to think about how we're going to produce and present our games in a way where they're going to be easily accessible. Because look, a lot of people, you must talk to fans all the time who don't get cable. And they feast on social media, and our players are incredibly popular there, but it's not a substitute for watching live games. And the thing that really excites me, there's been a lot of talk about games, in essence, being ported over to digital platforms. And you saw it with NFL, with NBC and Peacock. Amazon has games now, too. But it's, in essence, they're still the same games, it's the same feat of the game. What's really exciting to me, as you move to these digital platforms, it creates opportunities to do things unimaginable before in traditional television. I mean, frankly, for people who do want to bet, and you talk about that, you can do that. If you want nothing to do with that, that's fine. For people who want to buy the shoes the players are wearing, that the jerseys are wearing, for people who want to be part of a larger community, for people who want different languages, different dialects, for people who want to listen to commentary from Charles, not just during the break, but throughout the game, or people want Mike Breen to be doing play-by-play, or just to hear a group of people who are just fans having fun watching the game. So I think production's going to change dramatically over the next several years. And the other part about our game being global, I mean, even now, 75% of our viewership comes from outside the United States.
Yeah.
Who knew? I did not know that many people outside the United States. And you think about NBA Africa, but this is like kind of a microcosm for like the business at large and like how people are consuming sports. I find it so interesting. And I also want to say that I predicted that the 76ers Knicks game would go into overtime. I predicted it in the fourth quarter when there was not a lot of time left. And I'm like, they're going to tie. It's going to go into overtime.
That means she couldn't have bet that. She couldn't have bet that.
I told myself that.
Been too late.
I'm proud of you,
Tiff.
I was thinking it. And then it happened, and nobody was around for me to tell. But I should have dropped it in the group chat just so y'all knew. I literally thought that.
Think about me winning the lottery.
Okay.
See if it.
Can she bet on it sooner though? Can she bet on it sooner?
Do y'all have anything on that, or do y'all have a team that y'all want to say you're gonna win? Whatever y'all want to talk about. I just like to talk about sports.
There's not a lot of sectors that are growing. Like, I mean, you heard the commissioner say doubling.
Yeah.
Right. And we haven't, he talked about the percentage of global viewers. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of it. Right. I just hope that the global expansion creates opportunity for both the men's and the women's side.
Yes.
Already women
WNBA.
are going, to China and abroad and get, making 4 times what they might make here in the States. But, let this wild, rapid, incredible growth, both on expansion into other markets, but also in production quality and investment and women's games. Let it be across the board. That's all I got to say.
One of the things that I think is interesting about this is there is kind of a bidding war that's happening, and TNT could very well lose their rights to NBC Universal Comcast. Comcast said they're willing to pay right around where Disney is willing to pay. And so what I would put on the table, just in case the NBA listens to us for strategies to how to decide who you're going to go with, like obviously you should. I would ensure, just like the NFL has a Rooney Rule that they don't do so well at enforcing, but ensure that there's that kind of a process in place. Do the executives at these companies look like the players on the floor?
Oh, I love that.
Do the contractors they work with look like the players on the floor? Are the commentators who are talking about these games in between the breaks at halftime, the pregame, the postgame, who do they look like? Do they have experience with the NBA? Are you ensuring that there are WNBA players and former players also at that table? Ensuring that any ads that those companies bring to the table are doing business with WNBA and NBA players. Is there something that you can get them to do to throw the WNBA a bone? Y'all are partners in this mission. And right now, the women about to take you over, Tiff. I got my seats to the season opener, by the way.
I told you I want to go. I want to go.
Seattle Storm, March, sorry, that's not March anymore. Seattle Storm, May 14th. They are playing the Minnesota Lynx. I'm making sure that is the 14th and not
this
the 13th.
May? Like this coming up May?
Yeah, the season
ain't
opener.
You and me gonna be somewhere, and we gonna be in Miami.
May 14th.
Oh, you're right.
20.
Okay,
we
all going to Miami, y'all. Stay tuned. Anyway, I love everything you said.
I don't even know where I was going, but my point was make it blacker, and then maybe the NBA will consider it. Adam Silver, I'm speaking for you, so you need to run me a check or something. That's how this works. That's
I love
good
all
consulting.
your points. Producer Nick, can you dub like Angela's voice over my face? I wanted to look like I was making those points because that was so good about like the commentator. I love all that. I seriously though, I didn't even think about that. Like I was kind of looking at this from like a broadcast perspective, but the social justice element of that I think is so important. The NFL is still the
equity act. It's the equity, Tiff.
Thank
More
you.
than social justice.
Thank
We're
you.
not asking them to. I mean, it would be nice if they had a Black Lives Matter backdrop, but we're just talking about the people who know the game the best should be your commentators. The people who are occupying these seats. You want folks who understand the league doing business with the league. That means it should look blacker. How many of your players are Black? Come on.
That's so true. But even when you're talking about like the people doing business, the contractors, the commentators, like all of that, I think is so so tantamount to the credibility of the game. Yeah.
Like all
employees,
of it across
marketing,
the board.
contractors, commentator, all of it. I echo all of that. The NFL is still the most valuable sports league in the world, and they didn't quite double their fees. But I think what you're saying, Angela, about even these other businesses wanting to buy, we've seen massive layoffs at Disney across all divisions. You saw Discovery, Warner Brothers wasted a shit ton of money on CNN Plus and all the things they're doing. So I'm curious how many people actually have the deep pockets to be a real player in this. I take your point about Peacock, like they may be a player, but the streaming, the other streaming services out there, given the global audience, I wonder if Netflix will get involved in this, and what does this mean for people?
They have a deal with Amazon that's worth a lot of money, so they're slated to make
the NFL
over $75
but does the
billion. NBA, they're working on an Amazon deal too. I thought I just read that.
I read in the Times that was a rumor. I didn't know that was like.
I hope I ain't breaking on news.
Well, we don't know. We don't know.
I love you brandishing your.
The streets are talking. The streets are saying
intelligence.
We have heard
sources say there may be some talk with Amazon.
But here is an actual demographic number: more than 70% of the players in the NBA are Black. We would like to see it in the ranks of any organization that comes to the table wanting to stream or broadcast on linear. Thanks.
I love that. I love that. Well, that concludes my sports talk
Money
for
talks.
the show. And thank you for tuning in. But before we go, though, is there any team that you see winning the championship?
Not the Lakers. They only won one of their series games. They're out.
Lakers are out. Andrew, is there a team that you see getting the chip?
Hunt.
You don't?
You don't have one?
I don't have a dog in it, no.
This is I don't necessarily have a dog either, but you're supposed to say, I want to see a good game. I am looking forward to seeing a good. Thank you, girl. I knew it. I was trying to impress Angela because she told me if you don't have a team.
Where the Cliff Notes coming from?
Angela told me because I was telling her I was watching the 76ers Knicks game and I was like, but I don't even care who wins. I want both teams. I'm rooting for both teams. And she said, no, don't say that. Say that you want to see a good game. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying now. I want to see a good competitive game. Yeah. And my prediction
I'm going to tell you one person that I've been remarkably impressed with this season already this series already is Jalen Brunson for the New York Knicks.
This dude is a shooter. He was hitting those threes. Look at me talking about sports. He was shooting those threes. It was so every time. And the other little boy,
he's gotten several. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. Tyrese Maxey, but Jalen Brunson has had multiple games scoring over 40 points. So I want to shout him out. Especially because they gave him hell when he was going to the Knicks where his dad works, and it was a huge thing, huge scandal. But this is by far a better fit. The Mavs are playing well, but it looks like he's found his home at the New York Knicks. So I'm enjoying watching him play. I'm enjoying these games, but. Yes,
I love that his dad works. I only know that because I Googled him last night and I saw his dad was a coach at the game. I was like, that's so sweet. And he got a black mom, black daddy, nice little family. They just look so cute as a unit. And his parents met at St. John's, I think, an undergrad, and they've been together since. Did y'all not know that? Don't hate. Okay, I'm moving on. Andrew's hating on my sports knowledge.
I want to make sure we know what his dad actually what he does.
His dad used to play
He's an
in the league.
Coach. No, I know that, but I was trying to get his exact title, assistant coach. I don't know why I thought he was in the back office.
And coaching his son and just guided his son's career. I just think I like that little family unit. I love it. So shout out. Okay, well, you know what? Because I like their family unit, 51. I'm rooting for the Knicks. I'm rooting for the Knicks. That's what I just decided. We're hoping they get the chip.
And Spike Lee.
You just reminded, yes. I sat next to Spike at a Knicks game. And he was every bit, yes. Yeah.
He don't play. Now, if you ask him some questions during the game, you might get cussed out.
Listen, he was arguing with the players. He was going, he started, he was saying something to Van Fleet. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yes. And he was saying something to him. He is hilarious to sit next to. But the other thing, these kids, they look like big grown men. And then when you look at them, I'm like, you just a little boy. Like they just like in their early 20s, Yeah. Anywho.
And other news, World Central Kitchen founder and chef Jose Andres has announced that they are going back to Gaza. As you all know, they pulled out the Central Kitchen after 3 vehicles in their convoy.
I thought. Yeah, 7 people.
Okay, 3 vehicles. That's right. 7 people,
sorry, Andrew.
Were obliterated. So that's good news. They'll be able to get
Jose
back
Andreas
in there
is an angel.
Food.
He really is.
World Central Kitchen,
really
incredible work.
Well, thank you for that update, Andrew. We're gonna and you closed out our sports section.
Oh,
with,
I'm so sorry. Yes,
good news.
You may want to go back to that. Yeah.
Well, no, because when I get to talking about sports, I can go on and on and on.
I know,
so I'm glad you stopped the conversation.
Drip from your mouth.
I just can't help myself. So we're going to take a quick ad break, but don't go anywhere, guys. Because when we come back, we have calls to action for you. You don't want to miss these, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to be really quick. We have 3 calls to action for you, and I'm going to let Andrew kick us off.
So today marks the implementation or into effect the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, pushed by the Republicans. Almost half the women don't even know that they are pregnant at 6 weeks. And so this will have a huge effect on the state of Florida. But there is a constitutional amendment on the ballot in November. If you're not registered, y'all, please get registered. Tell somebody to get registered. That window closes 30 days out from the election.
Love it. Thank you. Angela, what you got?
My update is about Marilyn Mosby. I am hoping that you all saw Marilyn's interview with Joy Reid. It is her first. It's an exclusive, and I hope that you will be inspired to sign the petition. We are just over 9,000 signatures, and would love to see you all add yourselves and make sure that you add your friends and family. Please send it to them and make sure we get this pardon request on President Biden's radar.
Love that. And I'll echo Angela's call to action and just say, whatever you're doing in your community, do something. Do something this week that benefits the greater good. Before we end the show, I want to remind everyone to leave us a review and subscribe to Native Land Pod. We're available on all platforms and YouTube. New episodes drop every Thursday. You can also follow us on social media. We are Tiffany Cross, Angela Rye, and Andrew Gillum. Welcome home, y'all. There are 186 days until Election Day.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rye, Gillum, and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Welcome home, y'all.
What's
Welcome
up,
home.
sis?
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.